Jim Bucci. How you doing, man?
Never been better, Keith. Never been better. Great to
It's
hear from
always good to hear. Good. Good. Well, what do you have going on, man?
you. Well, I'm an older guy now, so I'm doing the big C word. I'm consulting,
Yep.
and been doing that for, fairly full time for a couple clients.
Great.
Work in Oklahoma and some international things.
Why don't you talk a little bit about both really quick? That'd be great.
Well, in the U.S., I've been in the industry now about 40 years, and I've got about 20 years now working over in Oklahoma, both the Arkoma and Anadarko Basin, really the whole state. And so I have, through my connections in the industry, I've had a lot of business opportunities to work a project as short as a week, sometimes as long as several months. And the one I'm doing now has just kind of been a repeat over and over again for the son of one of our favorite guys, Aubrey McClendon's son, Jack McClendon, has a
Oh, that's
company.
right. Yeah, you'd mentioned that you were working for Sienna, so Eric and Jack, huh?
Correct. And I'm also working also for his family and some of their other investment partners
Cool.
where they own minerals and whatnot. And I've been doing a lot of their geology for them. So
Nice.
that's what I'm working
Nice.
on right now.
Killer. Is that what I see behind the screen there?
Yes, that's some of the Oswego lime paleo shorelines or fairways there for some
Yep.
of the buildup. They have that
Yeah, there's
algal
some.
type reef buildups that they're drilling. They're now going horizontal on them naturally. They're going
Yeah, I drilled a couple of them actually. We did a couple of them at White Star, and I've had quite a bit of experience with the Oswego. I think it's a really cool formation. You've got that kind of vuggy porosity.
Yes.
Um, there's some interesting things. One thing that where it's got good porosity, it's almost like the good hunting porosity. It's like 10% plus. You got the really good crossover. And that's one of those formations. And I don't know if you've gotten this deep into it, where I would think, I don't know that I would pump cement over it and do just a regular plug and perf. I think I'd probably want to do more of an open hole kind of completion, depending on the porosity type that we have. And if it's the vuggy stuff, I think I don't wouldn't want to pump the cement.
Yeah. Well, you're right about the reservoir because it's almost all dissolution porosity. So whatever the original rock fabric was, a lot of the unstable matter, dissolves when it gets meteoric exposure. So you get some nice bugs in it, but it's very low perm. It's
Oh,
sort of left in less than a half a millidarcy of perm.
okay.
Sometimes the porosity can get up really high, so it's not very well connected. And as far as the fracks on these things, they're actually employing almost like a resource shale type fracks in these things. In other words,
Really? So they're going lots of stages and
they're putting
perf
in
and
a
just
lot of
blowing it up.
stages,
Okay.
a
Okay.
lot of proppant. These are the resource shales. Like the Haynesville, for example. They're 4,000 to 5,000 pounds of proppant per linear foot of lateral. These fracks in here are 1,500, but that's still a huge number.
Yeah, that's bigger than I thought. Okay.
Yeah, way
But you
bigger.
got
So
a
they're just trying to. So they are using proppant, and they're getting some pretty good initial flow rates. So
cool.
this is what's great when something starts to work at some level. Everyone kind of jumps in and tries to tweak it and try different things. So that's just part of capitalism, right? We all try to
Cool.
figure out how can we make it better, and that's what they've been doing, and that's why we have more production now in the United States than we've ever had, in spite of
Yeah,
the fact we have a lot less geoscientists. So the barrel of oil equivalent per person has really gone up since
that's
I
true.
started hanging logs
Yeah,
40
that's
years ago.
true. My last gig with Revolution, it was kind of a case in point of what you're saying. I mean, we did a really big, we had essentially three assets, kind of hundreds of thousands of acres, but we did the whole thing with like 12 people, you know.
Yes, it's
We were
incredible.
able to, using the new technology, getting everything plugged into the back end of our systems, it really made it efficient where I didn't even need a geotech. And you are going to want to have a tech, but in this particular circumstance, it was just the kind of place where we could do it all, and we were able to handle it. It kept G&A low and our efficiencies high. So,
Yeah. But
um,
the geotechs now, I think their job has become even more important because there's a lot of blocking and tackling. involved in prospect generation today simply because there's so many well bores to
Yeah.
analyze.
No, it's right. You're right about that.
Yeah, and so data mining and integrating data becomes really important, and that skill set is certainly very much appreciated. When we get our hands on it.
Yeah,
So
definitely. Well, unfortunately, I was able to kind of do that myself. And again, if you set it up right, but I 100% agree with you. The data requirements of what we do are so time consuming and voluminous
yep.
that, it in a lot of time, and again, depending on the size of the company, the number of wells and everything else, it's definitely worth having somebody there to do that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, think of it now. I'm working all over Oklahoma. I have roughly 600,000 wells in my database, and I
Yep.
have I have probably picked over 2 million formation tops now, probably in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
So I
I
have an
remember when you started
incredible,
doing that.
oh yeah, this just an incredible structural stratigraphic framework. Some of it I was doing on my own just for areas that I was trying to generate prospects. But then as I started taking on clients, then I ended up with a lot of detail and introduction into a lot more geology of things I had never mapped before. And
Okay.
looks like my screen turned off. I
Yeah,
gotta
that's
hit my
cool. Good wiggle the mouse. Yep.
there you go.
That's great.
You
No,
gotta
I
you gotta
love the
have the map
backdrop.
background or
I
I don't look
love
like
it.
a geologist.
Yeah, no, I love it. I love it. It's sharp.
Yeah.
So, well, that's cool. So, yeah, you have, I learned a lot about, the main things that I learned from you were about real prospect generation. And our buddy Sam McManus kind of says the same thing. We'd come in, we'd
Love
been
that guy.
doing a bunch of stuff. Yeah, I love him too. I'm going to try and get him on and talk about his music career. I don't know if you know, but
I didn't
he's
know he,
he's
I
playing
didn't know he
music
had
and
music skills.
yeah, no, he's singing and playing guitar. And so I'm going to see if about having him come on because I do want to have guests on that like have lives. So, I'm a geologist during the day, but at night, this is what I like to do. And I think that's what's interesting about people. There's
Absolutely.
not everybody's like us when we're being geologists at work and then we go home and we keep being geologists. So,
Like most geologists that I know, and of course I know a lot of them. Some of my best friends are geologists. They all seem to have a higher level of passion for things, even
yeah,
outside of geology. It's
yeah,
just kind of goes with the whole ball of wax. That they're putting their mind always in a 3D space and trying
yeah,
to go back in time, and
yep.
that takes a certain individual, I guess, and those people tend to be, I think, interesting people.
No, I do too. No, and I love it. And the more obsessed they are, the more interesting it gets.
Exactly.
So
And strange too. We could be very strange.
yeah, no, definitely. No, the
Yeah,
geologists are there. We are kind of our own breed, aren't we? On the sciences.
that's right.
So
All
yeah,
right.
and it turns out my kind of hobbies after work kind of leaned into the engineering and then podcast stuff. So yeah, I'm staying pretty sciencey, and I'm getting to talk to a lot of people about it, which makes me happy.
Yeah. Well, there's so many other sciences and skill sets that go into what we do. So you could push more towards a geochemistry as you are. It could
Mhm.
be inorganic and understanding those things, or it could be organic. A source rock recognition and mapping. It could be the physics side of things. How rocks break and stress domains and the
Yep.
whole rock mechanic deal. There's so
Work
many different
circles.
areas, and then you got the financial side.
Yeah.
The stuff that you're doing now is on the geosteering end. Some
Mhm.
of the skills that you're doing there is where the industry has really gained the greatest increase in productivity, because if you could stay in that sweet spot in that horizontal well, if you could stay in it 95 100% of the time, the payout's going to be incredible, and
Oh,
your fracs are going to really stay connected
yes.
for hydrocarbon recovery.
I would make the case that the most important thing that happens for an oil company is the ops team keeping the well in zone. Um, really the entire fate of the company relies on that. And no, I couldn't agree with you more. Like the geosteering, and it's relatively new. We've been doing it for a while, but now the data is really starting to stack. In places, the Permian Basin in particular, right? They're just lined up, stacked up and down, tightly spaced. Oklahoma here, we don't have quite the, type of spacing liberty that a lot of other plays do, but we've certainly started to stack the amount of data that we have. And, and I've said this before and with a few of the other people I visited with, but here in Oklahoma, we have a bunch of legacy vertical operators that are now kind of willingly or not a part of the horizontal plays. And they're
Sure.
still holding acreage and working interests and all these things in these wells. And they have technical teams and people that have dealt with their production in the past. But sometimes the new horizontal drilling is somewhat of a new wave for these people. And, say they may have a geologist there just loading their surveys into Petra and kind of guessing what it looks like. And so, what I would like to do for these types of people, and I hope that there's, a market for it, is to be able to come in and take their non-operated horizontal wells that they've got the data for, re-steer them, run analytics on it, and allow them to make better choices going forward. And and if they want to decide to operate themselves, I offer the ability to come in and plan from the geologic side. I've got drillers I can bring in if we needed to do that, but that's kind of a market that I'm kind of trying to get into here. And I think that it's viable, and I think it would be something that's handy to a lot of folks. So
No, it's turned it into it's made multimillionaires out of millionaires. You know,
yeah,
people that
yeah,
have the minerals in these small little acreage areas where they were just sputtering oil and gas.
yeah,
Now with these horizontals, they're coming alive with their productivity,
yeah.
and the wealth is spreading again all over again. So just when we think that we're at peak oil, we just seem to manage to find a way to get a higher and higher percentage of the in-place hydrocarbons that are in these rocks.
Yeah.
And
And
it's
from existing formations, but also I just want to jump in here really quick from existing ones. But what I'm really excited about is the fact that we got stuff like the Cherokee Shale now, right? So now, and that, I don't know if you've looked at it very much, but, Revolution drilled one of the, kind of 10-mile offsets into Texas that worked, and we were able to subsequently sell. And you know what? I was just blown away by were two things. Number one, I had the core, and I can tell you, it didn't look like any kind of source rock. It's basically a muddy limestone, and
all right.
then the other thing was just it's also not really high resistivity or anything like that, but how sneaky it was. So the good news about this, and what I mean by sneaky is, when we had purchased Jones, they had already been kind of working on this, but for not that long. And again, they've been some of the people that have pulled cores, done some DSTs and a bunch of work on this stuff. And, again, it was based off of shows and little like blows of gas, right, through the years. It was something that was documented, and, so a geologist got the company to believe in it. They pulled core, and unfortunately, but fortunately for us, the company sold before that was ever able to come to fruition. And we were the ones that benefited from it. And that's kind of a typical oil and gas story too. But at
Is
the
that
end of the
is
day,
that like a hybrid play? Is it a source rock with attributes of conventional rock in it? Or
yes, that's exactly what I would say. And I promise you wouldn't be impressed with the resistivity or the porosity, but what the deliverability is pretty incredible.
sure,
And it kind of harkens back to the flow unit stuff that I kind of learned from you. And I can't get too into it or anything like that, but we did do microseismic on it. And we have a pretty good idea of about what you get, and it works out pretty good. Now, one thing you're not going to be able to do in this play, at least in the parts where we're looking to stack 3 or 4 of them in a section, maybe 3, but it's a pretty high perm. I would just say it's connected. I don't want to call it perm, but I can tell you that there's certainly some bedding plane situations happening. So I think you kind of get out a little bit too. But the whole point of that was to talk about the hope for new plays still in places like Oklahoma. This thing was undercover. You can't, again, there's a few people that had seen it, but now I think there's more rigs running on the Cherokee Shale than there are in Scoop or in Stack right now. If you pull up Inverus or drilling info, you're going to see a slew of rigs out there, including Devon and others, that are very active in this play and having good results. So for
sure.
me, where is that going to go,
Is
and
that is
where's the
that
next one?
is that happening up in the northwestern part of the
This would
state
be
at
the
all?
Western Anadarko Basin. Yeah, this Cherokee Shale is kind of a big deal right now. Like I say, we transacted an asset on it that was held by Cleveland Production. And so in the Western Anadarko and into Texas and, Ellis and Roger Mills and these counties over there, really hot right now, man. Really, really hot. So
Yeah,
that, and again, and for me, what is exciting about that is that that's the next new play. There are still new plays to be had in the state of Oklahoma. And I think that the sky's the limit. And again, when you actually look at the characteristics, it really opens up the possibility for other stuff to work too.
sure, sure. And they're revitalizing old vertical fields. They're candidates with horizontal enhancement as well as water floods.
Yeah.
They're employing secondary and tertiary recovery methods in these old fields. There's a whole spectrum of opportunities, both new and reinventing the wheel on a lot of these with new technology.
Yeah.
And I think Oklahoma is going to be in the picture for a while here, as long as the planet Earth needs hydrocarbons.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's
Yeah,
a great place. And, as things go, depending on gas markets, that's another strength that we have, and it's kind of sitting there untapped more or less. And one little quick throwback to what you were talking about. I 100% agree with you on the old legacy field. What opened my eyes the most with my experience at Revolution was just how much oil could already have been produced from something, but how much is still left. And I think that these legacy fields were not efficiently drained. And if you can find ones that haven't been flooded, that's great. I mean, but even ones that have, you'd be surprised. They'd put millions of barrels of water into West Edmond Hunt and Lime Unit. And, we've come back 50 years later and we're still putting 1,000 barrel a day horizontal oil wells in left and right.
that's right.
So I do think that, I have an older buddy, Tom Spines, dear friend of mine, and he was one that kind of gave this concept to me about the orchard. Like if you're in the orchard where all the delicious fruit is, the fruit doesn't fall too far from that tree. And so if you can go into these legacy places that are in fact, legacy orchards, I think that the fruit and the benefits are going to be there. I'm a big believer
Sure.
in that. If I were to do it again, you raise it on PDP and have something else to drill underneath it.
Absolutely. I
Straight
mean,
up.
the old saying, it's an old one. It's that the best place to find oil is an old oil field because, so many people will sell. So many companies have sold legacy properties because they went on decline.
Yeah.
And if you look historically, and even like something like Yates Field, one of the largest oil fields in West Texas,
Yep.
and back then they were drilling on like 10-acre spacing because the
Yep.
oil was there. But as that went in decline, Marathon eventually sold that, and then here comes all these other new technologies to extract the remaining reserves. And because that initial number of the original oil in place was so big, getting even an additional 1 or 2% recovery of those original
Right.
volumes,
Right.
tremendous amount of oil.
Yeah.
And you've
1% of a
eliminated all the
billion is
risk.
another million barrels, right?
Yeah, that's right. You've eliminated all the risk, the technical risk, because you've got tons of wells, you got huge control. You really understand the three dimensionality of the reservoir, how it's
Yeah.
connected.
And that's the other good thing about these old
Yeah,
units, Jim, is the data. Exactly. I had that at Whaloo. I had 40-acre offsets, and I can tell you that makes a big difference when you're dealing with things like flower structures, right?
yeah,
So,
absolutely, absolutely. But I still get excited, for these brand new plays in frontier basins, like some of the stuff I've done in Africa, where there's been
yes.
very little of that technology applied, or very little wells drilled very deep. So the world still has a lot of for those who like exploration. There's still a lot of that that's out there for people because I was seeing it over there in West Africa.
Do you want to get into the West Africa thing a little bit again? We did do a little bit of a
Sure.
previous recording, but I've been thinking about it since we talked. And
Yeah.
you go into the Congo and you talk to some of it's onshore, some of it's offshore. You're working with the government. Why don't we get a little bit into that for a second, if you would?
Yeah, yeah. So, most of West Africa was all colonized by the French, the Belgians, the Portuguese and whatnot. And a lot of these countries were explored by the respective oil and gas companies that were in those countries. So,
Okay.
like in Congo, where I was, which was a former French colony, companies like Elf Aquitaine which eventually became Total, were the main ones that were over there, and there really wasn't many other companies. So very little work has been done in a lot of those countries now,
And a
and
lot of it was done by the bureaucracy. Let's be real. I
absolutely.
see a lot of upside on these kinds of things.
Sure, and it's just not a real integrated approach to how they did the exploration because it's just one company, and one company maybe thinks one way. So we went
Right.
in and we were embedded with the state-run oil company, and we worked directly with them. We were there actually mentoring them and trying to teach them exploration as well as ultimately drilling and completion techniques horizontally. But this play that we were in was amazing because it was an early Cretaceous proto rift type play. In other words,
Carbonate?
before Africa and South America were all joined together, you had these rifts that started rift basins that were initiated, and the very first sediments, in these was a lot of continental stuff, alluvial fans, braided
Okay.
streams, and
So it
whatnot.
was more like siliclastic at the
A lot of
base of the park.
plastic. But
Okay.
then eventually, as you started to get some relief in some of these rift basins, the analog would be the modern day rift lakes like Lake Tanganyika, Malawi, Turkana in
Okay.
East Africa. Very, very deep. And because they're deep, and they have a lot of stratification of oxygen that's in these, you end up with anoxia, and a lot of the
Oh,
organics that are mainly being generated by the algae that's in the water produce these very lipid rich, organic rich, oil prone type of source rocks, lacustrine source rocks, and
and
that's
that's what I was going
basically
to ask. These are fluvial and lacustrine rocks that you're talking about here in these
yes.
rift basins. Okay.
Correct. You start out with a continental, but as the rift begins to mature and as you get more and more relief and you get deeper water and you start to form these lakes with fresh water, this is where a lot of the algae prone source rocks develop.
Okay. And
So
they're happening in these lacustrine environments. And were there any, just out of curiosity, because I haven't done a bunch of lake work, but do you get carbonates in these kind of systems at all? Is it part of do you get a carbonate cap or any kind of like
yes,
cyclical stuff? Okay.
you
Okay.
you do get carbonates. You do get carbonates. There's even evaporates that happen.
Okay.
When basins are desiccated. But the main play that they were pursuing was actually a turbidite.
Okay.
So these fluvial deltaic sediments that would be influxing or pouring into these rift basins, into these
Hmm.
lacustrine environments, with big storms, you could push out a lot of this clastic material, some of the coarser stuff, out into the basin epicenters.
Sure.
That generally were starved of sediments because they were too far from source terrain. But during storm events, they would get the detritus that would pile up, and eventually, several successions of these storms over a few million years, you end up with, in this case, like 200 meters, 600 feet
Okay.
of these turbidites.
And is
And
it just turbidites that have happened over time and you've got like a bed boundary between them? So you have one and then
yes,
nothing, nothing, and then another one. And so it looks like just one big turbidite, but it's a whole bunch of them. How does
it's
that
multiple.
look?
Yes, it's multiple ones, and of course that's part of the dissection work that has to be done is to understand how that reservoir is connected because vertical and horizontal perm isn't necessarily good in this kind of rock. So you need to really map the stuff that's generically related or time equivalent. So you're looking for flooding. Uh,
Flooding
uh,
surfaces, but
yes,
underwater. Okay.
yes. You're looking. There are some like shale drapes that you get when it's no longer in a flood stage, and
Okay.
and sedimentation rates go really really slow. You get these maybe thin organic rich shales that might be 2 feet thick,
Okay.
and but you could see them and map them, and that's basically what we did. I think our reservoir had 5 different divisions that were in it, and we were targeting the one that had the best porosity and permeability,
Okay.
and going sideways in this stuff, and it had because of all the exotic minerals that are in it, all the feldspars and things from the Precambrian granites that were the source terrain. You get a lot of secondary porosity of these type of plagioclase and K feldspar. So a lot of the
Dissolution
one,
of those. So dissolution of the feldspars is where you're getting your secondary. Okay.
exactly,
And what
exactly.
comes in? So
Secondary
what kind of fluids are coming in to dissolve those? Got to be pretty hot, I would think.
kind of fluids are coming in.
Yeah, so what's happening to desiccate these feldspars?
Uh, these rocks were all eventually, uh, through their
Exposed to
structural
areally.
depositional cycle, were uplifted and had some level of
Okay.
exposure.
Okay.
I don't know if they were exposed at the surface, but certainly diagenetic fluids that aren't compatible with stability in rock fabric will create, vesicles, will create pinpoint type of vugs.
Yeah.
And so consequently, you have locally decent porosity, but again, very, very low permeability.
Yeah.
Again, this is the rock that really benefits from horizontal drilling and the modern frac technologies with all this
Right.
pop.
Low
And
perm saturated rocks.
pardon me,
As just said, low perm saturated rocks.
very, very low perm. And the main source rocks were right below it,
Mm,
called the Point Noir shales. And these having proximity to the source terrain, gave you good charge efficiency of the reservoir as well. So that's all. That's a very important thing that people don't realize that. But if you're going after plays, proximity to the source rock is really a multiplier in terms of the saturations that you might have. These things
definitely.
basically are almost like a tight oil play because the perms are so low. So you're basically going in. You're not looking for traps. You're basically just mining this
Yeah.
rock by
Right.
creating the perm
Yeah.
with the frac jobs. So
Saturated low perm rocks. So that's pretty
exactly,
cool. That's
this is
really cool.
it.
That's awesome. Well, so
Everybody.
are you still working on this job or has that kind of sailed?
Yeah, right now I did 5 rotations. I probably spent each rotation was probably 35 to 40 days. So
Wow.
I guess I spent about 200 days over there.
Okay.
And then eventually, as often happens in Africa, they ran out of money.
Okay.
They ran out of money actually while we were there the first 2 months, and we were very late getting paid. Eventually, they found money, and the Chinese are big investors there, so that's helping a little bit.
Okay.
But our most recent uh, conversation with the guys that are remained over there is that they shut down operations, mainly because they hadn't been paid in two
Okay.
months. And
Yeah. Okay.
that's just kind of part of the game. If
Yeah.
you want to go and work where no man has gone before, that's an
Yeah.
exaggeration, but there's reasons for that. There's risk,
Yeah.
and the risk are that they are not financially as stable as you would like to believe, and there's probably certainly a level of corruption that
Yeah.
have existed in all these countries here.
Hmm.
Even though they're so-called democracies, they're pretty much one guy that's been president, for
Yeah. 20
you know,
years.
5 terms or
Yeah.
whatever. So yeah, so I'm taking a break from Africa, but that really reinvigorated my interest in going back and working, more of an
Overseas.
exploration type play.
Yeah. Yeah.
I loved it, but I love it all, as you know. So
Yeah, I do. That's freaking awesome, man. I love it so much. Just
yeah,
your excitement bleeds into all of us, and your knowledge has helped so many of us. I've said this a bunch of times, but I've always been a small shop pretty much, but coming over to work with you and Aubrey and stuff was absolutely the springboard for the rest of my career.
sure.
And I'm not the greatest geologist in the world or anything special, but what I can say is that like I learned the basics from some really good people. And when I got to AEP, it was an exponential growth. And, I really do credit everything that I learned there from the exploration side and the operation side with where I'm at today. So I just, I appreciate you. You're one of my best friends. I just love you, man.
Yeah, absolutely. And
So
I appreciate those kind words. And we all have our past and we all had our learning curve, which hopefully we're all still on.
yeah,
And I had many, many people that were mentors in my life when I was, when I was just, young and thought I knew everything and I didn't. And, for me, it's just been if you love something and you do it long enough without even thinking about it, you get better at it and you get smarter.
yep,
And it doesn't really require to be a genius to be good at something as long as you love it and if you'll remember the knowledge is just kind of goes with it. So appreciate that, and let's all be mentors for the next group of people in our life, whether it's geology or whether it's just about something else in life. Let's pass it on.
I couldn't agree with you more, and those are perfect words to end with, Jim. Couldn't have been more perfect. So to all of you out there, please make sure that you subscribe to my channel, hit the like button, and definitely hit the notification bell, because then you'll be updated when I release new videos, which turns out to be a lot lately. If you are interested in coming in the show, please go to my website, www.thegrizzledgeologist.com, and fill out a form, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. But in the meantime, thank you for being here. And to all of you geologists, it's not all just liquor and guessing. We'll see you later.
You have to work for it. Don't be crazy. And work for your money.